everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on Frieren Beyond Journey's End, episode 4. Oh, I'm ready. So, technically, this was supposed to be the last part of episodes 1 through 4 were originally like one episode, and then it was supposed to start, episode 2 is technically episode 5. So, I will be honest, I do know because I added this series to my anime list, and when I added it, it said it was 28 episodes. So I'm like, okay, 28 episodes, which if episodes 1 through 4 were supposed to be one episode, it's about 24 episodes. That makes sense. Okay. So that's what we end up with. But so yeah, I'm probably just going to wait until after I get through this episode, and then starting with episode 5, I might read the lyrics for the OP and ED as we go through them, right? I'm still looking at the visuals, but I'm not paying too close attention to the lyrics because I at least want to get through this first technical episode before doing that. So that's where we're at. But the only comment I have going into this episode, I've been reading a lot of comments on YouTube and Patreon. They've all been great. I agree. The flower scene in episode 2, mwah, just absolutely wonderful. I loved it so much. But the only episode I have is from Kaku for this episode, and I did not realize this, but Himmel's voice actor is the same voice actor as Bakugo from My Hero Academia. And I was like, wait a minute, Bakugo? Really? Himmel? It's so funny because Bakugo is such a loud and abrasive character in My Hero Academia, and they yell a lot. And then you have Himmel, who's so soft-spoken. Even when he's being kind of vain and kind of yelling a little bit, it's still softer than Bakugo. So I'm sure Bakugo was really excited to have this character role. They were like, oh, I don't have to scream every 5 minutes? Perfect. Sign me up. But that's really cool. So thank you, Kaku, for that information. I always like hearing about voice actor information after we get to know the characters, because that usually is really fun to note. So yeah, I'm super excited to dive into this episode and see what we'll get. I was surprised last episode. I was really surprised that we see Frieren, killing another, monster, another demon, and to see her in action was really great. But it kind of didn't end like really on a cliffhanger. It was just sort of like the first half of it was her and Fern having these really great moments. And then the latter half was her going back to a place that her and Himmel had been before, and her kind of like tying up the loose ends that were left between her and Himmel and their former party. So I'm curious to see how this, first part is going to end before we jump into the main series after this, because technically we're done with the first episode at this point. So it's gonna be really interesting to see. But yeah, I'm probably gonna try. I got a new microphone, new setup, and it does make the background noise on the actual footage really softer. So I'm gonna try to edit this like I did episode 1. I'm not gonna guarantee that it's gonna work. If you do notice a link down below on YouTube, you'll know it didn't work. But I'm probably gonna try it and just see if it does mess with it a little bit. Obviously, I did have somebody in the first episode comment why I didn't have the OP or ED in the in-video YouTube edit reactions. That's because of copyright. You'll have to go on Patreon if you want to see me react to the OP and ED. That's all I can say, because I cannot put any OP or ED materials into the in-video edit, and any scene, I think what I'll have to be careful with, and that's going to be really hard with the music for this series, is any scene that is just like a quiet moment that has a track from the soundtrack. It'll probably have to be cut, and you'll have to see it in the Patreon version because of copyright. That's just music is copyright. Music gets a lot of copyright strikes real easily. It's also been noted by several people that Evan Call is the person that does the music for this series. And I don't know that name very well, but they did say they also did the music for Violet Evergarden. And I was like, now it makes sense, because if you do listen to this, I've watched Violet Evergarden, and the softer, it's softer, but it's also grandeur. Like the music just has this richness to it, and it's very similar to Violet Evergarden. So that makes a lot of sense. So we'll see, but I'm super excited to dive into this episode. I want to give a very quick shout out over to Patreon, to our philanthropy tier, to thank you guys all for supporting me. Not only just the regular patrons on Patreon, y'all support me each month, and that helps me to get these videos onto YouTube and onto Patreon for y'all to watch. So I really appreciate it. But the philanthropy tier go above and beyond, which I am eternally grateful for. So a special shout out to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Anna, to Be Happy, to Dana, to Danger Zone, to Destiny Marie, to Eric, to Curie, to Loisy? Maybe it's Loisy or Frogman, to Lyndon, to Matthew Palfinier, to Shimoyama, to Nameless Monster, to Sunspots, to Translucent Men, Trails. Thank you all so very, very, very much. I really appreciate it. All of my love. And to everybody that subscribes on YouTube. We've had a lot of people come in with Frieren, and I'm really, really excited about that. So with that being said, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right in to Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. 28 years, so another year has passed. Okay. Ah. Man, there's not enough people to clean up the shipyard. Getting Pirates of the Caribbean flashbacks. The world's not smaller, they're just less in it. Flam, yes, the legendary mage. Ooh, it's not a very thick grimoire either. I wonder why Frieren hasn't wrote a book, because the other mages all have books. Oh, it's fake. To help someone in need. Oh. I'm doing this for me. You're right, it is a selfish choice. She's like, is this about your dead boyfriend again? Fern's like, are you still hung up on him? It's been 80 years. Well, 28 years since Himmel's death. Oh, I like the color palette of this town. It's really pretty. You got an extra bagel just because you're you. 3 months. Wow, they stayed there a while to clean up. Wow, that's a long time. That's longer than I thought they'd be there. 3 months. Wow, Fern's an early riser. Oh, Frieren. Has coffee been invented in this world? I bet that would perk her right up. I freaking love Frieren. Morning Frieren is my favorite Frieren. She's so relatable. It's like her moment of levity. See, that's what I thought they would be doing, but I didn't think it would take them this long. Oh, she's like me. She's like a lizard on a hot rock. She needs some warmth. Wow. Are you really sloppy? Now it's making sense why it took her all this time to get all these spells. We'll talk about this. Oh, I wonder what that time she got in trouble was. I like that. And the shadow of him. Interesting. Oh, there we go. Oh, I like Fern Shaw. When was she there last? Yeah, we didn't talk about this. And Fern's like, you never say anything about this. And did you try to attend it with Himmel once? Wow. Is that the one time she got yelled at because she didn't get up in time to see it? Oh no! She's like fungus! Oh wow, and there we are. Look at that. Oh, and they checked the water quality. I've got a penchant for old bald men. Oh. That's impossible. I'll just stay up all night. Yeah, that'll work. Oh, what all the hubbub is about? Has she been told it's beautiful and she wants to see it for herself? Did Himmel tell her that she needed to see it? Ah. He just got too drunk, yeah. Oh. That little eye movement, like, because you're that kind of person. Oh no! I want to know Frieren's parents, like her mom, her dad. Oh, I love her little scarf as a bow. That's so cute. Beautiful. Exactly. She wouldn't be able to enjoy it without somebody there beside her. The land where souls rest. Look at this shippable moment. Yes, he's doing as every dutiful boyfriend would and praying to your family. Shh, Frieren, it's a shippable moment. I believe it should. Ah, there we go. It's faith. And him now being gone. Show, you're not going to get me to cry, so stop it. Stop trying. It's not going to work. And he's gone too. Stop it. Don't. Show. Don't you take Ison away from me too. Don't you do this. Don't you put this evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Don't you dare. Don't you put this evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Don't you dare. Oh. I'm here to hang out. 30 years, yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, don't you die. Shut up. Shut up. I was gonna talk about this. A long time ago. How long is that? Oh, speaking of phlegm. Oh, a lead. Oh, interesting. I wonder why she doesn't care to find Flom's notes. Is this how we're going to meet the redhead? Because he would have an axe? Fern! These two old souls! Yeah, right. Yeah, she's not going to be that patient. Then I should watch myself. Oh my god, I love Ison and Frieren's relationship. I love their dynamic. It's so good. Oh my gosh, that's so cute! He's just as bad as she is. Yeah, why? Oh, conversing with the dead. Ooh. I mean, ooh, this is interesting. This is interesting. Dangerous territory. 1,000 years. Is Flam their master? Oh, she's Flam. Oh my god, really? Wow. Oh, amazing. I love this. Oh my god, yes! Did you say it was a fairy tale because she knows Flam better than that? 1,000 years, though. What an unpleasant woman. Oh, wow. The narrator. Oh. And like the veil. So where is this place? It's at the northernmost place, right? Oh. Oh. The Demon King's castle now. That's how you want him. Oh. Hmm. Of course it was thanks to him. Of course. Oh, because she doesn't like the cold. Which is funny because her name is Frieren. Wow. Okay. We have a mission. We have a quest. Yes. Okay. So they've been there before. Oh, so they've been there before. Yeah. Aw. I don't know. Ah! Ah! Wow, and the statue! No, I think she is. Yeah. Well, she's just different. She is strange. Aww. 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 It took them 10 years. Wow. Okay. Well, this just got interesting. I had to bring Whiteboard Kun out because I was like, okay, we have a lot going on in this episode. It was so good. Oh my gosh. I'm glad Ison didn't die in this episode. I was like, show that when we start seeing the montage of all of them together, I'm like, well, Himmel's dead, Hater's dead, Ison, don't do it. I was like, don't you dare. And so I'm glad the show broke the fourth wall and he was like, I'm not gonna die yet. And I was like, oh God, thank you. So yeah, this episode, oh my gosh. Well. So we have a quest. We finally, if this was the end of episode 4 or the end of the first episode, we finally have like our inciting action, our call, and that is to go to the land where souls rest. Our narrator, the woman with the red hair, is Flom. She's a mage. She did not look like an elf. I want to pay more attention to her when we get back to her, but she didn't look like an elf. She looked like a human. And so I think that's what Frieren was saying, like, well, you're not going to live 1,000 years. And she's like, but you will. So interesting. We're going to talk about her. So we have the idea from Flom. We're going to put her up here. Flom, which means flame, which goes with the red hair, who is the mage. She apparently has visited Oriel, which is the land where souls rest. And supposedly, if you go there, you can talk with souls of people who have died. Now, they had like an archway and a veil that was fluttering through. And the only thing I could instantly think of is in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, there is an archway with a veil as well. And it deals with souls on the other side. So I was like, oh, okay. I can kind of understand that. That makes sense. But yeah, currently it is past the Demon King lair, which is curious, right? The interesting thing that's kind of fun about all this is that, so they technically have been around that area, 90 years ago, 80 years ago, but they were just there to defeat the Demon King and then they left. So they didn't really have a reason to go there and stay, right? But this is all in the land that's called Inde. The end. Haha. So I'm going to guess that now we have this journey. So this journey is at least slated to possibly take 10 years to do. Now, the question is, does it take it 10 years to get there and back, like round trip? Or so, I mean, that was a round trip for them at the time, right? That was a 10-year journey to get to the demon lair, but it wasn't that long to get back, right? Otherwise, that would have been 20 years. So we're looking at, a 5-year trip there, 5-year trip back, right? Still, that's quite a long time. 5 years to get somewhere. The idea of traveling for 5 years, I think it's hard for humans to fathom that because, we're used to the longest trip you drive on, maybe a 16-hour flight, a 29-hour drive, but something taking 5 years to get to is really, really massive scale. And it's hard to kind of imagine that. Even in series that are fantasy, kind of like Game of Thrones, you don't really, the scale of time doesn't really seem like that, right? So that's very interesting. And I'm sure there's going to be like lots of traps along the way, lots of little detours. It's not going to be straight as the crow flies the entire way. Although, technically can Fern fly? I feel like maybe she can. I know Frieren can. She just fly there and just hop, skip, and jump away. But interesting. So every time we get this little tick at the top that tells us it's been so many years after the death of Himmel the hero, it slowly dawns on me just how long it's been. Because it's been 28 years since Himmel died in episode 1, but it's been like close to 90 years, or at least over 80 years, since they traveled to defeat the Demon King. Now, we'll go back to that section, but it appears like maybe there's a new Demon King. Is it the little imp that's in the castle? Maybe, I don't know. Is there always a Demon King? If the one Demon King was defeated, does another one take its place? The world building, we'll just have to wait and see. But again, Frieren is going through the towns that she's traveled through and kind of reliving all these experiences. So let's put Frieren down here. I'm going to put her over here. Where her thing is she is trying to make up. She's trying to make up and experience what she took for granted back when Himmel was trying to tell her to do things. Again, this series, in the most angsty post-mortem ship, she's trying to literally go back and relive all those experiences that she took for granted and didn't, she missed out on because she didn't think they were important. And now she's trying to see why were they important, right? As soon as they showed up at the shipyard and we saw like all the ships, and the older man talks about how there's not as many people in the village as there used to be, so they aren't able to clean it up as neatly anymore. I instantly thought of Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it's the third one where Barbossa and Jack Sparrow are sitting there and Barbossa's like, the world's a lot smaller than it used to be. And Jack's like, no, it's not smaller. There's just less in it. And that's kind of the feeling I feel like Frieren is experiencing, is that all these things she knew and all these people she knew, they're slowly dying off and she doesn't know them anymore. And there's less for her to connect with, right? So without Fern, it really would have been hard for her to connect with anything anymore. And she probably just would have dilly-dallied around finding random spells for the rest of her days because she doesn't seem interested in anything else, right? I was curious why Frieren hasn't made her own book of spells, because it seems like her own grimoire, because it seems like all of the mages and sages have their own grimoires of all their spells and that they, incantations, things like that. Frieren doesn't seem to have one of those. So is she just not planning to leave any keepsake or memoir of everything she's found? What is she going to do with all the spells that she's found? Is she currently working on a book and a grimoire and we just don't know it? You know, there's a lot of questions with that, but I would not be surprised if Frieren originally wasn't going to make a book because she just didn't see the point in it. But they give her the book of Flamm's incantations as payment. And she's like, is this the only grimoire you have in your village? And he says, yes. So she says she'll take it. You know, she doesn't want to insult the guy. He says it's their only grimoire, so it's not like she can say, this one's a fake, where's your other one? But it all makes sense now because Flamm was her teacher. She would understand their handwriting so she can see that it's a fake. Like, I like that little reveal that she knows all the Flamm grimoires they've encountered are fake because she could recognize the handwriting. And she's like, no, this is not hers. No, this is not hers. This is not hers. Like, she understands, right? So put Flamm over here being Frieren's teacher. Yes. And her planting the sapling. Oh my gosh. So nice. What I like about Frieren's character is that Fern's like, why did you accept the job? And she's like, well, I wanted to help the people. And Fern's like, no, why did you really accept the job? Because she's like, I know it wasn't to help the people. That wouldn't be your MO. And she's like, I'm doing this for me. So I like this kind of self-awareness with Frieren that she talks about, that she knows that this goal is a selfish one. She's like, I'm not really out here helping the people. I'm doing this because I want to experience all these things that Himmel told me about in the past. Also, in the ship in front of her during this scene, it has a little hidden face. It has like an open mouth and two little eyes. I just noticed that and it creeped me out. But honestly, the passage of time in this series, like, this series does not beat around the bush. Like, they're there for at least 3 to 4 months. And they just come up and tell you that, and you're like, oh, it's been 3 or 4 months. Because I figured they would use their magic and the staffs to move the stuff from the shipyard, you know, to the shore. I thought it would take them like 2 to 3 weeks. I didn't think it would take them multiple months, like, you know, a fourth of a year to get through. But it does. Yeah, time moves both slowly and quickly in this series, which is, again, reflexive of Frieren and how she experiences time, right? It's just over like that, right? It's over like that, but yet it still spans a long distance. I also like the color palette of this town. I liked all the cool colors. It was very drab and gray, and it felt cold and lived in. Again, the world building and the setting of this series is a really good element because everything feels different. Each location they visit has a little bit of a difference to it, and it's very unique, and it just feels authentic. I guess that's the best word for it. But yeah, and I like this lady gives Fern the extra baguette. She's like, here you go. And then we go back to Frieren, and Frieren is not a morning Frieren is my favorite. I love morning Frieren because she's just not a morning person, and it's so relatable. And her little scrunchy face where she's like, the thing about it is, we know she's an elf. We have not met any other elves at this point because I don't think Flamm was an elf, right? I think she was a mage, but not an elf. I'm curious if part of being an elf is being kind of grumbly and being kind of indifferent or apathetic towards people, because we know that, I'm guessing it's the Demon King, maybe, that's in the OP that looks like an elf as well. Maybe they're not the Demon King. Maybe they're just like the boss they're going to meet for this season, because obviously this is an ongoing manga. I don't think they're going to make it to end by the end of this season. I think it's going to be a multiple season sort of thing. But I don't know what the elf that's in the OP that looks kind of sinister, what their role is going to be, if they're the Demon King or not, but we'll see. Who knows? But I'm wondering, because there's another elf in the OP as well that has green hair, and I'm wondering if he's going to be grumpy like Frieren, if it's just like an elf thing. Because we don't really have anybody to compare her to. She's the only elf we know, so... But I just like that Fern's like, I'm literally like your mom. Now, they did have 2 cups there, didn't they? So maybe they do have coffee. What? They do have coffee, so she has no reason not to be awake. Maybe it's tea. Maybe it's tea and not coffee. Or maybe caffeine just doesn't affect elves at all. But I was like, girl, you need some coffee. And she literally was getting some. But I love it. I love the idea that Frieren also doesn't like the cold, which is hilarious to me because her name literally means freeze. So maybe she was named that because maybe she was born in you know, the cold of Ind, and she doesn't want to visit there again because she didn't like it there, right? But we have Frieren. She hates the cold. We know that about her. And also, Fern describes her as sloppy, which was really funny because she later talks about Flom and says Flom was irresponsible. So I'm like, it's like pot calling the kettle black. Fern doesn't want to acknowledge, I mean, Frieren doesn't want to acknowledge herself as sloppy, whereas she acknowledges her mentor as being irresponsible. And it's like, when Fern takes on her own apprentice one day, what is that going to be like? You know, how is Fern going to be viewed? If Fern even takes on an apprentice, she's a human, so she's, you know, not going to theoretically live longer than Frieren. But I like she calls her mother. When she said that, and later on when Frieren says the word mother in her sleep, I really want to meet Frieren's parents, if there's like a little flashback we're going to get. But that was from over 1,000 years ago, so... And even 1,000 years ago, Frieren was an adult, like looked grown up. So we don't know how old Frieren is. We have no idea. But she was a student back then, so surely she wasn't much older than 1,000 at the time, right? Who knows? And she says, I did get in trouble once for sleeping in. Now, was it the time that she got in trouble for sleeping in? The fact that she missed the New Year's festival, or was it something different? I don't think it was the New Year's festival, so she did get in trouble once for sleeping in, but we don't know what that is, right? But she's like, those three were a different breed, and she's like, Hader would sometimes click his tongue and when he was upset. I really like the idea of Hader with her up against the door, and you can see the shadow of him with his glasses, and he's just like clicking his tongue at her. That's hilarious. And she's like, I'm sorry. Like, that's so funny. Very funny. So yeah, they burn all there, and she's like, we have a third of it left, and we'll get done by the New Year's festival. And Fern just kind of looks at her like, that's what we're doing this for this New Year's festival? So you can see the sunrise? Like, we're doing this to re-experience this thing that Himmel told you about that you took for granted? Okay. All right. But again, Eisen notes later that shows her growth as a person, because before she wouldn't have cared. She would not have sat there and wasted 4 months just working on cleaning up that shipyard. She would have moved on and found other spells, right? But she also finds with the sunrise, I like that it's not the sunrise itself that impresses her, because she's like, it's just a sunrise. It wasn't worth getting up for. But instead, it was the company. It was the company and seeing them in awe, because Fern is in awe of how beautiful the sunrise is. And it's just the idea that, you know, for Frieren, she'll see 1,000,000 sunrises. But for Fern, she's only going to have so many of those experiences. They're going to be more limited than they obviously are for Frieren. So, But yeah, they managed to clean up the waters, and so she can see it and get up early. And then she says she's gonna, I liked the fact they were cleaning out the ship with the barrels, and then they found the old pirate captain and the skeleton in the ship, and then she thinks she's found treasure, and it's just seaweed. It's great. But then yeah, the water looks so beautiful, and it looks like a completely different beach. And they're like, are you going to join us for the festival? And Fern's like, you're not going to be able to stay awake. And she's like, oh, I just won't go to sleep, right? And of course, we go back to Himmel. I don't know why, but disapproving Himmel is like just such an attractive character, where he's just sitting there like, oh, come on, Frieren. It's so frustrating, because I love Himmel and Frieren together. I love Eisen and Hader together, and both of those ships have sank. And so I'm like, ah! We'll talk about Himmel and Hader in a minute, or Eisen and Hader in a minute. But yeah. And then the look that Himmel gives her, I like that Hader was out because he was drunk too much. He was literally just hungover, and Eisen's like, how could you? I ship Eisen and Hader so much. They're such a ship. I love it. They're so perfect for each other. The fact that they wrote letters to each other, we're going to talk about it here in a minute. But he's like, we wanted you to enjoy it too. And she's like, well, I doubt I would enjoy it. It's just a sunrise. And she seems so, nonchalant about it. And Himmel's like, no, you would. And she's like, well, why? And he gives that like little eyebrow tilt. And I'm like, you're dead. Stop it. I'm like, quit teasing us. You're a dead man. Get out of here. But yeah, he's just like, because you're that kind of person, you would appreciate it. And it's the fact, not the sunrise itself, but who she's with, that she would appreciate it for. And it's like, oh, Himmel. And I don't think she finally gets it when her and Fern go, but maybe. And she's like, why am I doing this? And then she's like, it's pretty, but it wasn't worth waking up for. I love how she's animated in this, like the little gloss on her lips and her hair. Perfect. And she's like, Himmel didn't understand me after all. But then she sees Fern, and Fern says it's beautiful. And Fern has the same gleam in her eyes that Himmel had before. And that's when Frieren's like, oh, is it? It's just a sunrise. And then that's when Fern says, but you seem to be enjoying yourself a little. And she's like, well, that's because you're smiling. And that's when she gets it. She's like, Himmel did understand me. She's like, I'm enjoying myself because you're enjoying yourself. And Himmel's like, see, if you had came with us, you would have saw how happy we were. And that would have made a difference to you. Because when they were stargazing at the end, before Himmel died, she was like, seeing all her friends and everything, and everyone was so happy, and that made her happy. Himmel knew what he was talking about. He knew. He knows. And she's like, I wouldn't have been able to see the sunrise if I'd been on my own. And that adds such a layer to this story because, yeah, if it's like Hader knew she needed somebody. He's like, he knew if she came back to see him that she'd need somebody to go with her. Because, yeah, by herself, she just is wandering. And the idea that she's sloppy and everything, suddenly it all makes sense, like how she could waste so much time. If she sleeps till noon every day and then only gets up for 6 hours and walks around, well, your days go by really fast if you sleep until noon and then you go to bed by 8 or 10, you've only been up for 10 hours. That makes a difference. So it makes a huge difference. So it makes sense why she could waste all that time on her own because she doesn't have anything to she doesn't have any reason. There's no motivation for her to get up and get moving any faster, right? So again, we start out with the graves and they have the two little stones. Draw a little picture of it. There's the little stones, they have a line through, and then they have the stone on top, right? And then beside them, they have the little tray that has the flower on it, right? And those are the graves of his parents, which the little graves with the little cannonballs, it seems very dwarfish, right? And he's like, it was a long time ago. Again, we don't know how long dwarves live. But he looks over and he's like, what are you doing, Hader? And he's like, oh, I'm praying. And I like Hader's reasoning where he's like, look, regardless of if a heaven exists or not, it should. And he's like, I would rather believe that there's a good place that people go once they die than for it to just be nothingness. And I like that. I like that, Frieren's like, you're a terrible priest. And he's like, but no, he's like, it's more convenient this way. And she's like, I like that Frieren's in the background going, that's nice that you're touting your Christian religion, but but Isen's family has a tradition. Frieren's just like, did you know? Again, she just doesn't, and Himmel's just staring at her just let her go. Let her say what she's going to Hader. She's like, I'm skeptical of the idea of heaven myself, but since current magic cannot observe the souls of the dead, then we can't prove whether it exists or not. And Himmel's like, I don't think it matters either way. It's just the thought of it is what's important. And I'm sorry, but Hader doing the prayer to Isen's parents is in every romance, whether it's BL or whether it's a hetero romance, in any of those, one of the tropes is the significant other comes home to the parents and there's if a parent has died and there's a little shrine for them in anime, they pray to the parent and then the other parent's like, oh, you're such a good partner for my kid. That's literally what's going on, except it's with Hader, with Isen, and Isen's like, okay, all right. That's all I could think about. I was like, Hader has come to pray to the parents and they've given him his blessing to be with Isen. I was like, I'm all here for this. Why can't we have nice things, show? And then Himmel being like, this is definitely more convenient. And so then we go back to 28 years later, or 28 years after the death of Himmel, so like 80 years later, technically. And we see Eisen praying over the gravestones of his parents, except now it's like a pile of stones. Like, it's almost like over time, like here's the stone on top of the pile of them. It's like over time the stones have like torn apart and that he's built them back up over and over again, or something in the weather has altered them and he's built them back up. And then that's when Frieren and Fern show up to see him. He's like, you act like it hasn't been 30 years. Because she's like, hey, what's up? Like, it's just been, she's like, well, what's a mere 30 years? Because, yeah, she's been alive for 1,000. And he's like, and now it's a different flower. It's still the same little thing in front, but with like a tulip instead of a daisy. Right? And he's like, yes, you're right. So he's like, I didn't think you would take on an apprentice. And she's like, well, how'd you know? And he's like, I heard you asked Hader the same thing. And then she finds out that they've been writing letters back and forth to one another. Oh, and that's so sweet. Because I was going to be honest, I was shipping them back in episode 2, Hader and Eisen. And then when I thought about it more, I was like, well, Hader and Eisen, did they ever talk after they split up? They did. They wrote letters. Oh my God. I'm going to be honest. I thought that the redhead boy, because he had the axe, I thought he was going to be like an apprentice to Eisen at this point. So I actually was kind of hoping we met him this episode, but I can be patient. I can wait till next week. I can wait till next week till we see him, but I really thought we were going to see him a little bit earlier than we did, and I was like, ah. So yeah, that's interesting. I thought we were going to go see ourselves, Mr. Red-Haired Axe Boy. I thought he was going to be like working for Eisen. And then when they were talking about looking for the trees, I was like, well, he's got an axe, so maybe he's a woodsman and he's cutting down lumber and cutting down the trees. But no, not the case. So I'll be patient. We'll probably meet him next week, maybe. And so then, yeah, I like that even compared to the flashbacks with Frieren, I know her facial expressions, like, I know her looks haven't changed at all. She is like a creature of habit through and through. But I like how her face around Eisen even does look a little bit softer. Like her expression doesn't seem quite as harsh. Especially when we flash back to the Stargazing Festival and she's giving the answer about how she doesn't want to take on an apprentice because they'll die too soon. And the 3 guys are like, okay, yeah. Like even during that moment, it's so fascinating because it's like, yeah, nope, she has changed. She's not as frigid as she was back then, right? And then I like Fern talking to Eisen when she leans down. She's like, I bet she came here in prehistoric times. And Frieren's like, no. But when I was also thinking of Flame, I was thinking of Harry Potter as well, because in that story, there is Nicholas Flamel, which is Flame, and they are keeper of like a magic elixir that makes you live forever. So that was something else I was thinking of too, watching this episode, being like, okay, well, what's Flame's deal? And it's this idea of conversing with the dead. But Frieren doesn't think that it's true. Frieren thinks that it's all hearsay. And then we cut back to Hader, who found the location from the records that Flame left in the Holy City. So there were some documents that were legit, and we see Hader making a map. I love that shot of him over the lantern and making the shot in the trees and the map and everything. And see, Frieren, because she kind of like tries to brush off her mentor, she's like, oh, she was irresponsible and blah, blah, blah. She wants to throw off the idea of talking to dead souls as hearsay. But just so happens that it's in her notes. So she's like, you must know that. He's like, how he got that far in his research. I feel like Frieren didn't want anybody to know about Flame's research. And she's like, how dare that corrupt priest? How dare he research things? How dare he learn all of this? And so they go looking for the area. And then what I like about it is that Fern is kind of impatient. Fern's like, we should go look now. Let's go. And she takes off. And Frieren's like, all right, we need to get started, because Fern's already getting impatient. And I like that. I like Isen's like, you've changed. She's kind of like, why do you listen to her so much? And Frieren like, she's terrifying when she's mad. And he's like, oh, well, if you think she's terrifying when she's mad, then I should probably watch myself. But yeah, I like that her with the grapes and doing all the magic with them and then finding all these trees within trees and looking around. And then they find like one last tree that's the biggest there. And she's like, why did you look for Flom's notes? And Isen says, well, because I felt sorry for you. She's like, what? It's like, I felt sorry for you and Himmel. Because I wanted you to be able, on that day 30 years ago, you said you wished you had gotten to know him better. So she's like, basically, Hader and I got together. We decided to play like, ghostly matchmaker with you and Himmel, and decided to help you find some notes so that you could communicate with him one more time since you didn't get to know him. And that's kind of why we're doing this. It's like, we're just going to play ghostly matchmaker. Don't thank us. She's like, you should tell Himmel that. And I like that Frieren is instantly like, no, they say the notes of Flom the legendary mage described her conversing with the dead. That you could have that conversation with them. And I like that Frieren's like, I don't want to do that. She's like, that's a fairy tale. And besides, I don't want to see him now. Which is interesting. One, her saying it's a fairy tale. Is it like that she believes from her experience that those notes don't actually exist? Or she doesn't want to acknowledge them because she's like, no. But I don't blame her for not wanting to see him now, because I think part of her experience is reliving these moments, but also the idea of conversing with the dead once they've passed. I'm kind of with Frieren. I don't know if it would be the same, and then it'd probably bring her more heartbreak because she's already, it's taken her 30 years and she's still not over him dying after 30 years. She's still retracing all of her footsteps. Her seeing him again, like, who knows what that kind of emotion will bring up, right? But apparently that's what we're headed to do, so we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right? It's like, she's like, I don't really want to see him now. And he's like, well, all magic started as fairy tales. So, and don't you want to know more about Himmel? And that's why I talked it over with Hader. And she's like, of course you two would conspire against me. He's like, we were sure you had regrets, so we wanted to help you. And I feel like she doesn't want to admit that she has regrets, but that's been what she's been traveling all over this area for the last 30 years, is trying to like rid herself of those regrets. But, okay, so we get to see Flom again, the little sapling. And I like that Frieren's like, well, how's that sapling going to keep watch? What are you talking about? I want to see if it shows us Flom with little elf ears or if she has human ears. I want to see for myself. She's like, even after 1,000 years, I'm still dancing in the palm of my master's hands. There is a little bit of animosity there with Frieren. Like, she doesn't like the idea that she's still listening or still following her master around, which again, fire and ice, they seem like they'd be oil and water. So of course they probably would not get along as well, right? Okay, she does not have elven ears. She has human ears. So she's a person. And she kind of gets on to Frieren and says, someday you'll make a terrible mistake and wish you'd gotten to know people better. So she was predicting it 1,000 years ago that she was going to one day come back looking for this book and stuff, being like, you'll want to do this eventually. And Frieren's like, no. And then, surprise, surprise, she does. I like that Frieren there has her hair down. She doesn't have like the same, she's, looks like a little mage, but she doesn't have her traditional dress on and everything. And then she finds the notes. On the northernmost end of the continent, Ariel, the land where the souls rest. And I spoke with friends who once fought alongside me and will propel research on souls forward. This discovery of the century. But it's like that book's been hidden so that other people wouldn't know to go there. I like that Fern's like, is this legit? And Frieren's like, who knows? She was irresponsible. It could be a wild goose chase, right? And that's kind of the thing. It could be a wild goose chase. We don't know. But, It's the journey, it's not the destination, it's the journey, right? It's the friends we made along the way. So who knows? They may get to Ariel and there be nothing there. Maybe, maybe not. But here's the thing. They're retracing their steps to past the Demon King's lair. It's a win-win situation for Frieren because she gets to go back and re-experience the journey that she made with Himmel for 10 years, all those years ago. So she's still getting what she wanted. She's still getting to relive those moments with Himmel and kind of erase those regrets on the way to potentially converse with him from beyond the grave. So makes sense, right? It's kind of a win-win for her. So it makes sense why she'd go along with it. And they're like, where is this place? I love that shot of Fern looking over her shoulder and the light shining down on her. That's beautiful. So they're saying, and I like that Eisen's like, you have to find Oriel and speak with Himmel. He's like, you gotta put this to rest. You gotta have closure with your dead boyfriend so you can move on. So he's like, Hader and I are gonna be speaking from beyond grave to be matchmaker for you. So do this. And then Hader helped me get to this point. I love the way that they draw Eisen's eyes, and he's just like so serious. Like you can just feel how like stone cold serious is about everything. But yeah, so the thing about it is, she's like, well, where is this place exactly? And they're like, yes, it's where the Demon King's castle is located now. I'm like, oh, so we just gotta go back to that place. That's fine. So I love the little moment where Frieren like falls asleep on Fern's lap. It's really, really cute. And Eisen's like, Eisen's probably thinking she would never have been like this around any of them during their quest. She was always very prim and proper and like, I'm enough sort of thing. And now she is very different around Fern. And so Eisen asking her, is she a good teacher? And Fern says, well, all she does is drag me around while she searches for magic. She doesn't seem interested in getting to know Mr. Himmel, but she does seem to get interested in getting to know Mr. Himmel and his companions. And Eisen's like, well, the Frieren of back when I knew her on her quest didn't want to know anything about any companions and didn't care about people. She just cared about her travels, and that was it. So the fact that she's taken you on as an apprentice, the fact that she sought out Himmel's companions and the places he's been at, suggests she has changed a lot and grown, and that she is a good teacher by, teaching you all the magic that she knows and helping you as well. So, and Fern says she seems disinterested in her, but Eisen's like, no, by Frieren standards, she's very interested in you. Do not be deceived, right? But it's so sad. Like, it's so melancholy when you see her, how apathetic she was back when they were younger, and Himmel's like, and the thing about it is, Himmel never pressured her. He never, confessed. He never pushed her. He was just so nice. And it's like, you don't know what you got till it's gone. And now Frieren spent the last 30 years figuring that out. And it's like, sucks. It's so sad, but I'm glad I didn't cry in this episode. I was really concerned that was going to happen when there was some stuff between Eisen and Hader earlier on. I was like, don't you do it. Don't you dare. Don't you be this way. And then he takes them on their merry way. And then, they make it back to his house, drop him off. And then he's like, I'd only get in your way if I went. You remember how to get to Ende, don't you? And she's like, yes, we'll travel through the Willow region, and it'll be a long journey. It took us 10 years. We'll be following the same path Mr. Himmel's party took to the Demon King's castle. And then Frieren's like, oh, it'll just be a mere 10-year adventure. That's all. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, no big deal. No big deal. Just going on this big quest. I'm super excited. I like that we have this quest. We're going back to the Demon King's castle that they were during their 10-year party, except now instead of killing the Demon King, the quest is to go and possibly converse with Himmel's soul so she can have closure and be able to move on after she's talked to him and learned more about him. So interesting. And Flom seems to have guessed that that was going to be her final journey back to that tree at some point to get that book. So Frieren thinks that nobody understands her and everybody else kind of understands her to a little bit of an extent. So that's fun. But I'm really excited to hear your thoughts down below. These first 4 episodes did not go the way I thought they were, but not in a bad way, in a really good way. I'm excited to meet the red-haired boy. I'm hoping we meet him soon. I'm excited to meet the green-haired elf. I'm excited for all the characters in the OP. I want to meet them eventually. We now know Flom is the old mage, but she's dead, seemingly. All these great characters are dead, so that's exciting. Except Ison. Ison has to live. Ison has to live when they get back. I don't want Ison to be gone when they return. Nope. I don't want them to get a letter or a carrier pigeon telling him that he's passed. No, I want him to be there when she comes back. Right? So I'm excited, y'all. I cannot wait to see what's going to happen next week, but I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers, hints, or clues. But in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with more Frieren. Bye!